So today we're going to talk about buyer consults. I very rarely do formal buyer consults anymore. I actually had to do one though back in May, so I just compiled this. And what we're going to talk about today is what's important to be in the buyer consult package. I don't necessarily recommend any particular format. I think it's important that you guys each come up with your own stuff as far as artwork and how you want to present yourself visually. You'll want to use your logos and colors and things like that. But we'll start at the beginning here. You can get buyer leads from many different places, the most common being an open house or referral, right? Or your direct sphere of influence. So this buyer consult was set up for a referral. I didn't know the people, but they were referred by a friend of mine. They were friends with the husband. I was friends with the wife. So they were referred, they went to college together, and I had not worked with my friends that referred me, but actually their sister-in-law and brother. So it wasn't so cold, but it wasn't very warm either. And these were very technical people, a science teacher and special effects engineer. So they asked to meet with me, and I was like, oh, wow, okay, no problem. So I got this buyer consult together. So the very first thing you need, right, a title page, right, a cover sheet. I don't know if you want to do this on harder paper or if you want to bind it somehow in a folder. So, for me, I just used a blanket home buyer's guide. Another agent in this office helped me compile this. And you probably want to make sure that your face goes on here because it's not very common, but it's possible that these potential buyers might be interviewing more than one agent. And when I take the time to make something professional like this, I want to make sure that my name and my face are right on the front cover so that they remember that it was me who brought this to them. So I have my name here. I have my title of a realtor, and then my secondary title of the director here of agent training and mentorship. And then my contact info. Sorry, I'm trying to get that little bar down. Do you guys see that little bar? No, you don't. All right, so we're going to go into the home buyer's guide. So it's just like a little welcome and table of contents, and I'll read it to you. Welcome, you are about to embark on the exciting journey of finding your next home. Whether it is your first home or your 10th home, a retirement home, or an investment property, I am committed to making your home buying experience an amazing one. I can help you find the right home and strategically guide you to the close of escrow. I am devoted to using my expertise, my network, and the full resources of my office and team to not only achieve these results, but exceed your expectations. So I wrote that. Each one of you should have sort of a mission statement for yourselves for both sellers and buyers. If you don't have one now, it's something you should probably work on. You can include it in your website, you can include it, your social media, you can include it in mailings you do, but probably most importantly, you can use this kind of stuff in your buyer consult package and your listing package, okay? So we're gonna move on to the next page. So the very first thing I wanna know when I'm meeting with buyers is I wanna know about them. And I sort of use some questions to help guide me, but I don't always stick to the script, right? So when I meet someone, if they're a referral, I want to know how they met that person, how they know that person, how long they've been in the area, how familiar they are with LA, right? I'm also asking these questions not only to get to know them and build rapport, but I want to know how to manage their expectations. If they're from Nebraska and they're moving to LA, they might have some unrealistic expectations of what they're going to find in their price point. Maybe they don't, but chances are they are going to. The Keller Williams blanket packets for buyer consult are like 50 pages long. They're huge and they have a bazillion questions, right? Asking the buyer, how many bathrooms they want. What do they want here? Do they want a pool? Well, chances are in LA, unless you're a very fortunate agent, your buyers are not buying a $10 million home and they're not going to get all of their wish list. Anyone have any ideas as to what might be most important to a buyer? Probably location. Why location, guys? Probably, right, close to their kids' school if they have kids.
Close to work.
Work, that's right. Safety, convenience to their family members, their points of interest. So So yes, I want to find out if they have kids, because they might not think about it until it's an afterthought, but if I can keep my eye out better for something that's in a particular school district, I will. And unfortunately, and I'll hold this sometimes, but sometimes they'll tell me what they want, and I know it doesn't exist. Do I tell them that at this point? I don't, actually. I do maybe touch on the fact that it could be a little difficult within their price range, but we'll set up a search and see what's there. And once they see that they're maybe not a whole lot of inventory in their price range in their ideal location, then I'm going to start gently making suggestions as to where, where I think might be comparable but more affordable for them, might work for them. So I'm going to get back to the little script here. And like I said, I use this more as a prompt. And I don't actually write these things out. I give this buyer consult to the buyers, and I take a notepad with me and I write things down as I go. That way when I'm entering my MLS search for them, I have all of my notes right there. So when would you like to be in your new home? Sometimes you have buyers that need to be out of a lease at a certain time, or they're tied into a lease and they're not going to be done with their lease for another 3 months. Well, you might want to set them up on an MLS search, but you want to explain to them at that time that an escrow takes about 30 days. We can start looking, but could become problematic. Are they able, you can open the door to this conversation, are they able to swing a mortgage payment and their rent payment, right? So these are things you need to be conscious of and guide them through. The price range that I feel most comfortable with, and I always ask this question. Why? Because most of the time, especially if I'm doing a formal buyer consult, these are less experienced buyers if they're asking for a formal buyer consult is my guess, right? Maybe not, but most of the time, yes. So just because a potential client might feel comfortable with a certain price range, it doesn't necessarily mean that the bank is going to approve them for that loan amount. So during this question, when they give me the answer, I say that's great, and this is where I open the door to, okay, so have you guys started talking to a lender? I also try to guide them at this point. Ask if they say no, I ask them, would it be okay if I emailed you a few referrals? How many referrals are we supposed to email over, guys? 3. Do I always send 3? No. No. But you should. You should.
You really should send 3.
You really should send 3.
Because it's a lot.
3 is a lot. And when I send 3,
how about 2?
And even, well, technically, you should send 3. The reason being is, let's say one of them does a disservice to your client. Who are they going to blame? You, because you referred the mortgage broker or lender over. A lot of times I'll send over the 3 and I'll tell them, guys, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to order them from my favorite, from my favorite down. And that doesn't necessarily mean that any one of these people on this list is not a great lender, otherwise I wouldn't put them on the list at all.
Right.
But that I encourage them to speak to all 3 of them and decide who they're most comfortable with.
Because even for some people, they're like 3. Like I've recommended 3, and they're like 3.
So here's your workaround. Is I'll send you 3 from the lender I work with the most often, and I prefer working with the most.
Sure.
And I'll give examples also. So the lender that I work with most of the time, he's done loans for my grandparents. For me, I've worked with him, 10 plus years. He gets loan docs in a week early. I started working with him because he told me something couldn't be done when every other mortgage broker on earth said it could be done. And it put me in a really bad spot, but I remembered that he was honest with me. Mm-hmm. He specifically asked me, if this gets done, will you please tell me the name of the mortgage broker who gets it done for you? I want to learn. I want to find out how they did it. And that really impressed me.
Yeah, sure.
But what most impressed me is that he didn't put me in a bad spot. He was honest with me. And so I share those stories with the buyer because guess what, guys? You have so much more chance for success if your lender is involved with your buyer. Okay? A lot of times your potential buyer is going to say, I sat down and talked to my bank. And while I do encourage them to work with anyone they want to, I explain that banks can only shop their programs, so a very limited number of programs. However, a mortgage broker has access to thousands of programs. So most likely with a mortgage broker, they're going to find a better deal. Okay? All right, so after the price range question and talking with them about, how a bank, one of the other things I mentioned, and this will display your knowledge to them also, especially if they're looking at a condo, is, when I'm talking about what a bank would approve them for versus what they're comfortable with, is that banks factor in HOA payments in a really weird way, kind of exponentially, and HOA payments are not tax deductible. So if it's a condo they're looking at, it's probably even more urgent that they talk to a mortgage broker. Okay. So question number 3 is I need at least blank bedrooms, right? Most people are like, I need at least 2 or 3, but they prefer 3 or 4, right? So I set up my parameters. On the MLS search, I set them up on the high end, right? You have your option to put in range, but I say I want, 2 to 4. 2 to 5, why not? No one ever hated an extra bedroom. So if they tell me they need 2, I'm setting it up 3 and lower. They tell me they need 3, I'm setting it up 4 and lower. Maybe even 5 and lower depending on the price point. Okay, blank bathrooms. So the MLS counts bathrooms in whole numbers only, right? So we know what a 1.5 bath is. That's a powder room and a full bathroom. But the MLS just counts them as 2. So if they're like, we need 2.5, what is that going to be in the MLS? It's going to be 3, just so you guys know, okay? All right, and at least blank square feet. So square footage is tricky. Not every buyer is spatial, right? I have a pretty decent idea of what's necessary for some people to live, but depending on where your clients come from, they may or may not need that same amount of space that you think is reasonable. So, for example, if they tell me they need at least 1,500 square feet and it's a husband and wife, no kids, no animals, I know that 1,500 square feet for a 2-bedroom is pretty big, right? And especially if we're pushing price point in the area that they want to look in, I try to have a little bit of a discussion here. Well, would a little bit less be okay? 1,500 is very large for a 2-bedroom in our area. They range anywhere from like 900 to the 1,500 range. Would it be okay to maybe look between 1,000 and 1,500? Something like that, right? And I even further sometimes when I set up my MLS search, play with the parameters a little bit. Because I don't think 25 square feet one way or the other is going to kill the deal. And I don't want to exclude the perfect property that they fall in love with. I can't tell you how many times, almost every time I set up a buyer search, the buyer ends up looking at something and buying something in a completely different area, completely different from all the criteria they gave me anyways. It's a process. So this is the beginning of your process, is in training them as to what's available, what will work for them. And I've had, on the flip side, a couple from San Francisco that said, we only need 500 square feet. And I was like, well, okay. Well, that makes it easier to probably find something very nice in that price range, but why don't we open it up to a little bit larger as well? I think we ended up with something closer to 1,000 actually, but just keep in mind where your client is coming from and that you're the professional, you're here to help guide them, right? You're sort of like their matchmaker, and that's what this is about. It's like the initial consult for matchmaking with their property. Okay, so question number 4 is, I am most interested in the following areas. I can't tell you how many times someone's like, I have an $850 budget and I want a house in Beverly Hills or Brentwood. Like I said, at that point, I probably wouldn't just tell them, no, it doesn't exist. I would just say, okay, I think that's, pushing the price point for that area a little bit, but let's see what's out there. And once I run a search and nothing comes up, then I can email them back. It gives me more correspondence time with them, right? And I let them know that there are no single families that came up in Brentwood, but I did find these condos, in this area or this surrounding area right here, like maybe BHPO or Century City. So there is some stuff in your price point, but condos in these areas, right? I always try to come up with a solution before I tell them about the problem. So those are my ways of trying to sneak suggestions in there. All right, 5, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 meaning immediate need to purchase and 1 meaning that I'm just curious about buying a home, I rate myself as, I honestly don't even really go over this question. Why? I want them all to be very serious and actively involved. And you're going to tell pretty quick, right? So if they're getting pre-approved, if they're responding to your MLS search results that get emailed out automatically if you're doing an automatic search for them. And here's the thing, guys, you have to engage with them too, right? So when you see a property that pops up that might work for them, You might want to call something out. Hey, this is on a great street. I happen to know the area. It's open on Sunday. Would you like to take a look, right? I'm always taking initiative to be proactive to try to get that showing with that client. I can't tell you how many times I've been working with buyers for 5-6 months and they're pickier, right? They're in that $2-3 million range where it's sort of where they are expecting something, but maybe we're not finding everything that they want. Where I'll go back to our search results too, after we've gone through a few things and their mind has changed. I'll go back to my search results in the MLS, and there is a way to do that to see what's come up in the past. And I might re-suggest properties even. I might be like, oh, well, now that we've seen this and you know you like this and don't like this, how about revisiting this one? I know you didn't want to see it previously, but based on what's come out on the market or lack thereof, would you consider taking a look at it now? I can't tell you how many times those end up being the properties that those buyers buy. Right? So it's your job as the professional to help them with that. Gently though. Don't push too hard. It's a good way to upset buyers and not get buyers to work with. Okay, 6. I have met with a lender to pre-qualify for a loan, yes or no. I told you I worked that into the price range question. 7, I would like to know how much I qualify to spend on a home. Well, of course, that question should be yes. Like I said, this is a template, right? So I'm not reading any of these questions. Like I said, once again, I'm using this just as a guideline. These are prompts if you forget something. So if you haven't done many buyer consults, and I'll tell you myself, I haven't done many formal buyer consults, right? Most of the time, this is literally a phone conversation for me. Just like I'm talking to a friend. I just want to find out what they want, what they need, what they're looking for, and set them up for success. So if you are doing this consult, at least for me, I was a little nervous. So this is a great place to glance back to when they finish answering a question and make sure you covered all the bases. Okay, 8, I have a home to sell before I can purchase my next home. I like that answer to be yes. I would love to sell their home for them. Are they working with an agent? If they are, well, I'm glad that they're looking at me as, for a buy. But you definitely need to find this out because let me tell you, in other states, it's very, very common that a homeowner would start looking for their next home before they put their home on the market because the market's not hot like ours. Contingent deals where someone has to sell in order to buy and vice versa are very common in other states. So be a little more thorough if you're working with people from out of the area, okay? They may not be aware. Let's see. The best days, times for me to view homes this is a great question to ask, right? The reason why is because first off, you don't want to be bugging your Mr. and Mrs. buyer at work, right? If they have a high stress job. One of them may be a lot more available by phone than the other. Those sorts of things. How would they prefer to communicate? But most importantly, it's great because it opens the line of conversation into, well, we are in a very competitive home market here in the Los Angeles area. And there may be times when I see something so good that pops up, that time will be really, really crucial as far as getting you in and making an offer so that you don't miss out on a great property. Because a great property that's priced well is going to move very quickly, as we all know, right? Okay. All right. The top 5 must-haves for the home you buy. Most of the time, buyers have no idea what their must-haves are other than maybe school district, proximity to work. So I lead them through this. We've already talked about bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage. If I was going to be looking for a home in the valley, I would absolutely have to have a pool. I run hot. I would not consider the valley unless there was a pool, but that's me, right? There are some people with younger children, maybe they don't want a pool at all. Maybe they have to have a 2-car garage. So let's talk about the things that are important, guys, because you're going to need to bring these up during your consult, and it's going to show also your experience level. Parking, location, security might be an issue. A yard is also something that could be an issue, right? How busy the street is. What else, guys? If it's a condo, whether or not they accept pets. You definitely want to find out if your client has pets.
Or low HOA.
Well, low HOA, that comes up after you talk to a lender and find out how much they can afford. I'm just talking about like features of the home. Like, you can't sell a condo to your client who has 2 dogs if it's a 1-pet per unit restriction, right? And some clients will know what they want to pay on HOA dues, but not all of them. Let's see, what else? Another one is like, is the parking tandem or side by side, right? I don't want to deal with tandem. When I've got to go, I've got to go. I'm always running 5 minutes late to my appointment or my showings. Don't do that. Be early. Yard, pets, school, pool. Oh, AC. Right? AC is another one. I find it shocking that some homes don't have AC in LA, but a lot of them do not.
Really? I haven't even come across any.
Oh, there are a lot. I like older, like
I've
Art
not seen the
Deco.
wall units often. I mean, that you see still all the
Wall
time.
unit, yeah, different. I mean, wall unit's better than nothing, but I think a lot of clients are looking for central.
For sure.
Yeah. But I do run across quite a few homes that have none,
Nothing.
or just a wall unit. Hey, the place I live in only has wall units in the bedrooms.
That I see
And
a
my
lot.
place before had 0. I was much skinnier in the summer. All right, let's see. What are 5 would not consider features in the home you buy? Okay, so maybe this is the family with children that doesn't want a pool, right? They don't want to be concerned about the safety of their children. Maybe they don't want a hillside property. Because they've lived on a hillside and had issues in the past. Maybe they need room to expand because they can't afford a larger home now, but they'd like to have, make their family larger, and so they need room to expand. So they wouldn't consider something that they couldn't. So these are just ways that you guide your clients so you can better get to know their preferences. It does not necessarily mean that that's the home you're going to find for them or that it's a findable home, but it is how you open the dialogue. All right, very important, contact information. I can't tell you how many times I have almost left without getting the client's email address. I have their phone number, but I don't have their email. How can I set up an MLS search for them if I don't have their email? Right? And I hate looking stupid and emailing or calling them after, or texting or calling them afterwards to ask for their email when I just sat down and met with them. Okay? This is also another point where they'll probably tell you who's easier to get a hold of. I actually find it to be more common that when it's a married couple, there's one spouse who is a lot more reachable than the other. And when they say they're both reachable, I like to do group text message. But obviously, and I say this all the time, you cannot do a real estate transaction by text, unless you're Paula. If you're answering a real estate question by text, you are doing your client a disservice. Most questions, you should be finding out the motivation for your client asking them, right? Why are they asking? A lot of times the client's asking a question, and if you gave them just the answer, they still have a misconception in their mind. So I want to find out why they're asking that so that I can better answer their question. And most of the time there's not a yes and no answer. A lot of times there's layers to it. And so when I find out what their motivation is, I'll explain, well, this can affect this in this way. And there are a few options, a few ways to go about it. I know those aren't good examples. Let me see. Gosh. Now I'm on the spot here. Let's see. Well, it was a lease client, and she was asking about pets, right? But she had a disabled daughter, and it was a service animal. And I told her it's a non-issue. It's a service animal. Is it possible that we could get rejected for the service animal? Yes, but with your permission, I probably wouldn't even mention it until after the fact since it's protected by law. Because it's not a pet. It's a service animal. Yeah, just find out what your client's motivations are when they have questions. So get that phone number, get that email, probably get that address at that time also, right? What if they don't buy for some time? You want to keep them on your mailing campaign so that they continue to see your name and face. All right. I don't necessarily agree with this guide 100%, but it's a good starting place. Buying a home, and you guys should just be taking notes, right? Because ultimately you're gonna compile your own buyer consult, right? This is something that I compiled quickly, and I compiled a smaller package for local people who weren't a cold referral. They knew people that I had sold to. So a year out or ASAP, get your credit reports. Obtain your FICO credit scores. That's kind of one and the same, right? I don't like discussing my clients' financials or credit with them unless they just throw it out there and they're willing to talk about it. Some people are very private about that. So I actually defer that to a lender or the mortgage broker. I'm like, so, it's time to work on getting your credit pooled and making sure that everything that you think is in order actually is in order the way the bank needs it. And I'm like, so this mortgage broker that I'm referring to you, they can walk you through all of that and help you with it. Consider credit monitoring service. Most of the time, hopefully you're not meeting with a buyer that is like a year out. But if there are credit issues, things that are gonna fall off credit, so let's say you meet with a buyer and the mortgage broker says, they're not quite ready yet, they still have some marks on their credit, they'll fall off in the next 6 months, right? So you're gonna tell your client you might wanna sign up for a credit monitoring service, something free like Credit Karma. That way they can make sure that it actually falls off in the 6 months, because credit reporting agencies don't always do what they're supposed to. And I put something in my calendar to prompt them, like with a phone call in 6 months, hey, just thought you should check in with your credit monitoring service to see if everything is showing the way it should be now. If there's any problems with that, I'd once again kick them over to the lender. The lender can help walk them through contacting the credit bureaus and getting things off of their credit report that should be off at a certain time. Okay? Attack your debt. So once again, if a buyer doesn't qualify, right, the way a lender looks at a buyer's income is not just their income, but their debt to income ratio. So you may notice if you have a high balance on your credit card towards the end of the month, your credit score is going to take a huge drop temporarily. Then you pay that balance off, and the next month it's 30 points higher. This is because your credit is factored with how much you owe in relation to how much credit you have in the world and your income. Okay? So I tell clients, pay down your debts. You're going to get a better rate that way. One other thing to mention, don't go out and make large purchases if you're looking to buy a home. It will cause problems with the loan. Do not go and buy a car while you are home shopping. Buy the car after. Don't open any new credit cards. That lowers your credit score also. Opening new lines of credit, the amount of time that you've had a credit account open for affects it. Save money. So you'll also want to make sure that your client is aware that for the most part they're going to need, for a residential property that they're going to own or occupy, 10 to 20% down. Okay? 20% being more common. If it's going to be an income property, they're going to need 25 to 30% down most of the time. Once again, though, a lender is going to be able to give them a better exact number on the percentage of the down payment that they'll need. Switch to automatic bill pay. Wow, if your clients have trouble paying their utility bills, I don't know what to tell you. You're probably not going to be selling them a home. All right, next step is home buying process. So a lot of buyers, they want to know what the process is like. And I think this is actually more important for a buyer or seller, a buyer who has bought or sold in the past, especially if they bought or sold in another state, because the process is entirely different. There are different entities. They meet the sellers in person a lot of times. They go in person to go sign things a lot of times. We don't do that here. We keep buyers and sellers separate. And in all theory, your buyer could never ever go into escrow. They could sign everything electronically or mail it in. They could have a traveling notary bring their loan documents to them towards the close of escrow. So I like to go over the home buying process with them. I tell them, the first step is what you're doing now is you're selecting a real estate agent to represent you. Obtain financial pre-approval. That's the step with the mortgage broker that I'm referring you to. Analyze your needs in a consultation, which we're also doing now, but we'll pair that with the pre-approval that we get from the lender. So if what we're talking about now greatly differs from the pre-approval amount that the lender provides to us, we'll probably have to revisit a little bit of the criteria that we're entering into the MLS now, or that I'll be entering into the MLS. select properties. So, initially when you set up an automatic MLS search for buyers, you're gonna get everything that's active on the market currently, right? So that could be dozens. So that first big email that I send out, I go through each one and I'll respond to that email because as an agent, if you select the box in the MLS search, you'll also receive a copy of what you've sent to your clients and anything that automatically goes to them from that point forward. And if you're not, what are you doing? You really need to see what you're sending to your clients, right? So when I have that big list, I'll actually go through each one. I'll look at the photos, I'll look at the areas, and I'll make several suggestions. And I'll say, hey, I think these properties meet your needs the best. Maybe there's one that doesn't, and I'll say something like, this meets all of the criteria except blah, 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 but it is super cute and it's in a really nice location. So I make these suggestions out of the gate because I'm much more likely to get a buyer responding to me when they see that I'm doing the work and I make that list of 35 properties 5 all of a sudden for them, right? Then they'll start looking at them. Once your buyer starts looking at properties, if they can actually buy, you almost have them hooked at that point, right? People get excited. You're probably going to result in a showing. Or you're going to result in if they're not real, they're probably going to not respond to you at that point, and now you know. So they select the properties. I let them know, please just let me know if you see anything you like, and I'll set up an appointment for us to go view it together. So before I go and view the properties with them, I tell them, I do my homework. I take a look at the pictures. I call the listing agent. I ask them if there's anything that I need to know about the property, right? You are making a very big mistake if you just call a listing agent or text or email them and say, hey, can I show ABC Street on Monday at 2? No, I say, hey, my clients would like to see this listing on Monday at 2. Is there anything I need to know about this property? There may be an offer in, there may be a tenant in place under a lease, right? If your buyer needs to move in, there's no point in showing that property. I don't just nix it though, I go back to my buyer and I let them know what I've discovered about the property and asking that one simple question that may make it more or less desirable for them, and I let them choose. So if they're like, I want to see ABC Street and there's a tenant in place for 6 more months, I'll write back to them and I'll say, hey, just wanted to let you know I can show this to you Monday at 2, but the listing agent told me that but I called the listing agent and they told me that there is a tenant in place there for the next 6 months. Are you willing to take on a tenant for 6 months? Right? Most likely they're going to say no, but if they say yes, great. What else does it do? It shows them I did work for them. The more work I can show them I did for them, the more they can see the consideration and time I put in for them, the more likely they are my buyer, right? Sorry, I'm digressing from explaining this to the buyer a little bit, but I want you to understand both perspectives, my strategy behind what I'm discussing with them. So I give them the abridged version. So I'm going to send you properties that I preview, and then they'll go to you automatically after that. I'll be reviewing all of those when I receive them. If I see anything that I think might work particularly well for you, I'll shoot you an email asking you if you want to see it. You just let me know what you want to see, what time you're available. Yeah.
Question.
Mhm.
Do you find when working with buyers and sending them stuff like this along the way, they're just non-responsive?
I don't send this to anyone.
Or, no, not this, but if you're sending properties to somebody, do you find sometimes they're non-responsive? And then how do you usually handle that?
So exactly like I'm telling you, I'll chime in when I see something, and if they don't respond to me, they're probably not my buyer. Right? I'll try a few times, and I might give it a week or two, and then I will directly ask, hey, were you guys still interested in looking at property? If you are, great. If not, please let me know, and I'll take off the MLS search, or if you still want me to leave it up, I can do that, but I'll stop, chiming in with my comments on the listings that pop up for you, right? Most people aren't so rude that when you ask a question like that, they're like, oh yeah, she should sit there and scour info for me when I have no intent on buying.
Yeah, I've kind of, because I've heard like from different people both ways, where some people are like, I just keep sending to them, and sometimes like literally 10 emails later, they're like, yes, I want to go see that.
Uh-huh.
And then, you know, and then some other times people are just, they just don't want to respond back, they're not interested, so that's an interesting approach as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gentle about it,
Mhm.
right? I let them know that it's okay. I'm happy to keep the search up for them, that I'm here if they need me. But at the same time, if they're not interested, I don't want to bother them with my repeated emails making comments about these properties.
Yeah.
And just to let me know in either case.
Do you also have the open houses listed? Because you have,
No.
there's an option not to.
I do not.
Okay.
I do not send the open houses on my MLS search results unless these are my clients. for,
Really
you know,
trustworthy,
yes.
you feel comfortable,
Yes.
like they're really gonna work with you.
Yeah, I
Otherwise
mean,
you
my
don't
past
put it
clients,
there.
most of my business is by referral.
Mhm.
So when it's my referral clients or people who've worked with me in the past, I usually keep the open houses on there.
Okay,
Um,
but if it's like a new
No, I
buyer
don't.
that you found from
I
Indiana
don't.
General or something? Okay.
Because I want to build a rapport with them.
Right.
So even if there is an open house, I'm going to be like, great, it's open on Sunday. Do you want to meet there at 1 o'clock?
To have them inquire.
Uh-huh.
And are you're just sending them the agent detail short? Or,
Client detail.
Or sorry, I mean, that's what I meant, not the agent
Mhm.
detail, just the client, yeah.
Do you do the short or do you do the long bold?
I do
email?
short unless I always do short on my MLS search
Mhm.
results. I do long when I'm pulling comps.
Okay.
Yeah. Or if it's only one property, if my client picks up the phone and calls me and is like, oh, I love this house.
Mhm.
I'll be like, great, let me pull up the MLS listing, I'll send it to you right now. And then I'll do client detail full.
Okay.
Let's see, where are we? Write an offer to purchase. So write an offer to purchase is a shortened version of what you need to do, right? So I prep my buyers that we'll need the pre-approval letter, we'll write an offer together, and we'll have, a discussion before I write the offer about all of the terms, like contingency dates, what's industry standard, what preferences they have, what they need. But that I will also need a proof of funds. You'll need a proof of funds for the entire down payment plus closing costs. So closing costs are generally between 1% and 2% of purchase price. Closing costs are things like escrow, title fees, lender's fees. Most listing agents wouldn't know any better. So if you're making an offer on $1 million home and you're gonna put 20% down, most of them will take a $200,000 proof of funds. If it's my buyer, I'm submitting a $220,000 proof of funds. So, just because they have enough money for the down payment doesn't mean they have enough money for closing costs. And you'd think that this should be a no-brainer, or that if they have 200, they should have 220, right? But let me tell you, I've had one time in my career where the buyer almost backed out of the deal because we come close to close time, and this is when I'm an assistant to other agents. She's like, I don't have the money for these extra fees. I bought a house for $1 million. Why am I paying 1.1 total, or whatever it was? Well, you have to pay your lender, you have to pay your escrow officer, you have to pay your title company, you have to pay for your insurance policy, all of these things through escrow. A lot of buyers do not know this.
Was this her first time buying a house?
I think so.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why you need to give them a net sheet. I mean, do you?
Oh, a buyer's estimate? I mean, I might give them a buyer's estimate, but I don't necessarily think that, I don't think that's necessary. Why? Because I'm having this discussion with them when I'm doing the buyer consult, that closing costs are generally between 1% and 2% of the purchase price. And it most of the time depends upon the loan and whether or not it's an HOA.
So in escrow, at what point do you give them a net sheet?
Oh, once I open escrow, I ask the escrow officer to provide them with a buyer's estimated closing statement. They have to create it for the lender almost right away when you open escrow anyhow, so it's not like they're doing extra work. So the buyer should see that. And I always prep the buyer that escrow tends to estimate on the high side, because it's always easier to give less money than more money, and that these numbers are going to change up until the actual day of close, because there are prorations that are based on daily totals. But that they will generally change in a way that is less money for them, pending any major changes in their loan structure or any of that. All right, so I talked to them about writing an offer, having the proof of funds. I talked to them about the closing costs at this time. I let them know that, well, obviously if I'm gonna write an offer, one of the first things I do is I call the listing agent and I find out if there's anything specific the seller needs. Do they need a lease back? Are there 8 offers? Because I'm probably gonna advise my client differently on how to write their offer if there are multiples versus singular. Negotiating terms, right? So I explained to a buyer that it's not a yes or no answer necessarily to an offer, that there are counter offers and negotiations involved possibly. And yes,
If a buyer likes a place, do you have to run a CMA to see if that's, the price is actually a good price to put an offer?
do you have to? No, but if you're doing your job well, you should. I mean, where else are you gonna come up with that number? I mean, sometimes your client knows what they're gonna write, like knows what their max is, right? But that CMA should help them realize that it's worth more or less maybe than what they as a non-agent knows about value. There are sometimes, they just can't afford more. It's still worth a shot, I always say, to write an offer. It also helps you train your buyers who are being a little unreasonable about pricing. Yeah? Did you have a question?
Yeah, no.
Okay. But yes, I always pull comps. So if we go see a property and my client likes the property, I'm like, great, I'll pull comps. They don't have to ask me for them. That's the first thing I do when they show interest in a property. As soon as I get home, I pull comps. This is important. Why? Well, okay, so we just closed an escrow where the client loved the house. The seller was adamant about the price. And I was like, the house is not worth that. It's just not. It was worth $25,000 less than what they actually ended up paying for it, but I told them that. I told them via email to cover me. I told them that house was not worth the price that they paid for it. I explained why. I showed them the comps, and then I asked them, well, what's your intention here? Do you plan on living here for at least 4 or 5 years? Because if you do, I'm not so worried about it. If you plan on living here for a short while, you may end up losing money. You may not, but you may. I want you to be aware of that. And they were okay with it. This has happened to me twice, but it's not very common. And we closed it. And that's another discussion to have also. That's going to cause an appraisal issue. So they have to be able to bring in more funds possibly with the lender. So that's the time to get your mortgage broker or lender involved right away. Make sure that the buyers are aware of the extra funds they may have to bring in to make the deal work. Okay? So that was an extra step I did before we made the offer. All right, so accepting the contract. Also opening escrow, entering escrow. I explained to the client how contingency dates, when I'm prepping the offer and asking them about their preferences on contingency dates, and I'm guiding them on what's an acceptable offer as far as terms and time. I also explained to them, date of acceptance and how the contingencies are counted from those days. One of the things I do as an agent is I count out every contingency, including close, from my acceptance date, and I put that in an email to my client. One of the most common questions is, wait, when do we have to have this done? Wait, when do we close? Well, when I put it all in an email like that, I don't get those questions. And also, if I'm in the field and I need to find it in my email real quick, because I need to remember what I'm doing or prioritize something, it's a good place for me to find it. So I explained to them what the process is, which is once you open escrow, what's the first contingency that usually expires?
Inspection.
No. Deposit.
They have to
Oh,
wire
Deposit, yes.
Oh.
3 business days, that's the only business day contingency, the rest are all calendar days. When you count out these contingencies also, you have to look at the calendar, like the time of year. Maybe there's holidays. Maybe you need to consider that. All right, so then it would be physical usually, right? So I explain what inspections we should have. I send referrals to my clients. I ask them right away to choose them because I explain that if we find anything in our what I call my core inspections, which are general, sewer, and if there's a chimney, and if there's a pool. If any of those inspectors find anything that need further investigation, I need enough time to line up a secondary inspector. So I explained to them that it's very important that they're present, right? So they may have to take time off of work, that at least one of them's present. That if they can't be, that's fine, I can cover them, but I always recommend that they're there so that any items of concern are explained to them thoroughly and they can ask the questions they want of the inspector. And, you know, at that point, they decide if they want to ask for credit or repairs or whatever. And depending on the seller's response, we move forward or we don't. After that would be the loan contingency. We get formal loan approval, and at that point, it's a done deal. No more appraisal and loan, which the lender takes care of. But if we lift those, if that's it, it's pretty much a done deal, right? So I explained that after we lift that last contingency, there is no way for them to get out of the contract. Most of them don't want to, thank God. But they do need to know there is a point of no return. Okay?
And if they do, they lose the deposit.
Not necessarily, but we can go over that in contracts class. So this whole middle section right here, we've talked about this section. We've talked about this section. On this side is, they call it all title here. In Northern California, title and escrow are one entity. Here in Southern California, we have escrow and title as separate entities. So I just want you to be aware of that. If you're talking to agents in certain areas, sometimes title is escrow, okay? Which is why you'll see diagrams like this all refer to that side of the deal as title. So I explained to my buyers that the escrow company will have a bunch of documentation for them to fill out, that it's very time sensitive. I described the escrow holder as basically the wedding, event coordinator, the wedding planner for a wedding, right? They handle all the money and payments, and they handle getting all of the information out to everyone who needs it. And so that they should respond to escrow right away. Remove any encumbrances. That's just the process of escrow and title, making sure that any seller's liens or issues on title are taken care of prior to close of escrow. And that's always automatically done. The title company is not going to allow recording without that being done. On a great occasion, there's a mistake. It gets discovered, you know, probably years later when that buyer goes to sell, but that just doesn't really happen. So, you know, one of the questions that these particular buyers I created this for had for me were, well, who makes sure that the seller's loan is paid off? Who makes it? Escrow and title. Yeah, escrow and title. Obtain title insurance. They're like, well, I want to see the title insurance policy. I showed them the preliminary title report, and I explained that the title insurance policy doesn't get issued until after we record, right? Because they don't pay those liens, or, you know, the mortgage off until money actually changes hands. But I guess in maybe some other states it's done a little differently. I don't know. I've just gotten some particular questions about that kind of stuff. So it's very important you have this discussion about what happens with your clients, especially if they bought or sold somewhere else or in the past, even here. All right, obtain funds for closing, also known as funding. When does funding occur typically? 1 day prior to recording. So in Northern California, there's something called special recordings, where a lender will fund, basically give the money of the loan to escrow and title to make the payoff and transfer the proceeds to the seller. And in Los Angeles, we would record the next day. Well, in Northern California, if the funding happens early enough, they can do what's called a special recording, which is recording the grant deed on the same day. Not very common, it's a pain in the butt. I'm not gonna say it's not possible in LA County, but it's like an act of God. Your title rep is doing you a huge favor. You're paying what happens is your title rep physically goes down to the county recorder's office, and out of their own personal bank account is going to be writing a check for the documentary transfer tax. Basically, what the county charges as a transfer tax in any real estate sale. So they could be going out of pocket like, you know, 10 grand to make your special recording happen. And that's only if they have an entire afternoon free where they can go stand in line and do that for you. So I'm not going to tell you it's not possible, it is. And, you know, if you ever have a gigantic big deal that has to close on a certain day, I want you to know that that does exist and to call your title rep right away. But it is so hard, you don't ask for it unless it is literally do or die. And you generally are not going to be asking for it unless it's a huge deal.
What is the edit again?
What's that?
What is it that we're asking for here?
Special recording, which is to fund and close on the same day. So here we fund 1 day prior to close. So, should you fund on a Friday? No. Why? You don't want the buyer to pay interest on a loan on a home they don't yet own over a weekend. So we don't fund on Fridays unless it's because the rate lock's expiring. And if that's the case, the mortgage broker's gonna let you know. We fund on a Thursday or we fund on Monday. Okay? And I explained to my clients or buyers, recording can take place anytime during the day, 9 to 5. As soon as the title company tells escrow, they tell me, and then I'll call you, congratulate you, and I'll make arrangements to get keys from the listing agent for you. And that's basically the deal. All right. There's this who does what. We've already talked about this. I'm including this mostly as a cheat sheet. So what we just talked about, this whole process, this home buying process, and I'll share this all with you guys. I'll post this on my YouTube so you can refer to it, okay? This section here is basically all of the points we just talked about on this diagram here. So they're interchangeable. But until you're super familiar with this diagram, you may need this broken down cheat sheet in order to better explain that diagram. We've talked about that.
And we can find the cheat sheet.
I'm going to post this on my YouTube for you guys, yeah, with the video. It'll be a few days, but I'll have this for you.
On YouTube or Facebook?
Both.
Okay.
Both. All of my YouTube videos are always posted on my social media. But if you have my YouTube channel, you have access to every single one of my classes that's posted. So probably a better place to look. So most importantly for me is my business model is referral. I'm not trying to be fancy. I'm trying to be good at my job. I'm trying to be honest, and I want you to know I'm going to represent you very well. And I want you to know that it's based on my experience, not who I worked with, not how much the home costs. It doesn't matter to me. So the best way for me to convey that to my clients is references from my other clients. Am I going to give seller references to buyers? No, right? Because I want them to be able to relate. I'm going to give my buyers buyer references. And in order to compile a references list, you have to have past clients, right? But if you have past clients, you also need to go ahead and get their permission. I always ask if it's okay to include a past client on my reference sheet. And since I so rarely actually have to give these out, I send them a reminder text. I just say, hey, you know what? I just met with a new buyer and I gave your number out as a reference. Just so that they're not caught off guard. It could have been a year since the last time that I asked them if it was okay. And I typically, if I have enough past clients, I typically only give references from more recent clients, right? A more recent client's more likely to take the time and go in depth and remember the process and what it was like. They're just much more likely to better support your case of giving a great referral instead of a short, oh yeah, she was great. How about she was great, she did this, 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 and that. I'd rather have that reference, right? Than, yeah, she was great. Okay? And that's it. At that time, I just ask them if I can, when they're looking to make a decision, if it's okay with them if I make a follow-up call. And if they'd like, or if I feel like it went really well, I might just go for, how about I set up an MLS search for you now? And take it from there. There are a million things you can add in here. You can add in your sales stats if you want to. I like my packages to be small because for me it's about the personal interaction. It's not about my numbers. Although there are some people that are focused on numbers. So recently someone asked me, they're like, well, what have you done here? So what I did was I just compiled an email and I showed them all the addresses that I'd sold in that area. Right? But so if you think you're going into a tough buyer consult, you may want to make your package bigger than this. Show your past sales, show some statistics. What else could you include in here?
Some referral from other clients.
What's that?
Referral,
This is references from other clients.
Oh,
What else could I put in here? If you don't have any references, that's tough, but maybe you can have a reference from someone you worked with in the past, just a professional reference. You can use your brokerage statistics if you don't have any of yours yet, and you can get those from Veronica. If you are in the mentorship program, your mentor can help you with that and probably use some of their info, right? Because for all intents and purposes, you can position your mentor as if they were your partner, your silent partner, unless you want them to be an active partner. They should be checking all of your work and any of that anyhow. And if you ever really need help and you're not in the mentorship program or your mentor's not available, I'm happy to help you myself as well. Okay, that's part of what I do here, running the program. So, any questions?
So this will all be posted on your YouTube, like this whole slide?
Yeah.
Cool.
Good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, one of the other things that might be helpful is maybe putting a sheet for like your sub vendors. You know, like if you have a handyman, if you have just maybe putting an inspector list together. I mean, I don't want to give my good people away unless I know these people are going to work with me, right? But you might want to put something in here that I have working relationships with all of these people who can help you before, during, and after the home buying process as well. One of the things that I make it a big point to convey to them is, we're not done. You're not on your own once we close the deal. I am still here for you. I am still here to provide support and references in any way that I can. And like I said, my business model is referral. So I want to maintain that relationship. I want to be friends with them. I get more business through going to my past clients' kids' birthday parties and their friends' birthday parties than I do from anywhere else. So when I get new business, it's from that, maintaining that personal relationship. So I think that's one of the things that agents forget to put in their buyer consult package, is that I'm not just here to sell you your home. I'm here to help you with any real estate you need that you have before, during, and after, whether or not it results in commission. Make sense?
I think sometimes even if it's nice, like once you close the deal, that you just send them a text, even how's the move going?
Yeah.
And you know.
Yeah, I
hope all
check in
is
with my
well,
clients.
things like
I
that.
generally
People
wait
love
a couple
that.
weeks, ask if I can take them to dinner. I send thumb drives with their entire transaction. So if you use Transaction Coordinator, they'll just upload them onto your thumb drive for you. And I'll either mail them out or drop them by. Anything like that. And almost always when you reach out to them, there's a question that they have. You know, when you're moving, you have a whole bunch of things pile up and there's something in the back of your mind that you forget to ask. But then I'm there and all of a sudden I get to be helpful. So when they go to sell, very likely they're going to sell with me because I maintain that relationship.
Or they'll tell their friends.
Or they'll tell their friends, even
Right.
better, right? More sales now. All right. Any more questions?
Do you have any experience about the appraisal contingencies?
Appraisal
Banks
contingencies?
appraise the low price, so
I can't hear.
appraisal contingencies.
Difficulty with it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I have experience with it.
How did you handle that?
How did we handle it? So you need to talk to your mortgage broker. If you think the value is not going to appraise for what the buyer is under contract for, the sales price. Yeah, so right away you want to get in touch with the mortgage broker, because it could restructure their loan if they don't have enough cash to bring in, which could affect their rate. Or if they have more cash to bring in, that's an option also. But the lender is going to have to tell them what that dollar amount is, or that price, that rate change, or that restructuring of the loan is going to be. And then your buyer has to decide if they want to proceed, and if they do, what option they want to proceed with. Yeah, it's fairly complicated, and as an agent, you don't need to be able to, you shouldn't have the solution for them. All you need to know about is the issue and where to get the answers, the solution to that problem. You know, we obviously don't have any control over how a bank structures the loan, but you definitely need to be aware of it. Yeah. And then, the better option is ask the seller to reduce the purchase price.
Yes.
I did it in this last one because we knew what we were getting into.
The luxury condos, usually they should down payment about 40%, 35%.
Yeah, that's probably not an issue if they have a higher than normal down payment, but once again, it's going to restructure their loan a little bit. Yeah. Okay.
Mm.
Thank you.
You're welcome, guys.
Thank you.